There are some women whose lives cannot be understood by looking only at what appears on the surface. They may never seek attention, never demand recognition, and never announce what they have survived. Yet their lives carry something deeper, a quiet strength formed through faith, endurance, prayer, and years of walking with God. They have been overlooked by people, misunderstood by those closest to them, and tested in ways few could fully understand. Still, they continue forward. And according to the spiritual message we are exploring today, there are certain marks that reveal a woman whose life has been shaped, refined, and set apart by God. A woman chosen by God is not identified by beauty, status, popularity, wealth, or the number of people who admire her. The real evidence appears in her character. You see it in how she responds when life becomes difficult, how she behaves when nobody is watching, how she handles rejection, and how deeply she trusts God when circumstances give her every reason to doubt. Her presence may be quiet, but there is often a noticeable peace about her. She does not need to dominate a room to make an impact. Something about the way she carries herself reveals that her confidence comes from somewhere deeper than human approval. And behind that strength is usually a story that was anything but easy. Every chosen woman carries chapters that most people will never read. There were tears she wiped away before anyone could notice. There were prayers she whispered when she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. There were nights when she questioned how much more she could endure, and seasons when the path ahead seemed completely hidden. She has experienced disappointment, loneliness, rejection, uncertainty, and perhaps betrayal. At times, the only thing keeping her moving was the belief that God had not abandoned her. That brings us to one of the clearest marks in her life: divine endurance. A chosen woman does not simply survive pressure, she allows it to transform her. Difficult seasons may shake her, but they do not have the final word over her identity. She understands that hardship can either make a person bitter or make a person deeper, and she chooses to let it deepen her faith. What was intended to crush her becomes something God uses to refine her character. When circumstances become overwhelming, she learns to pray before she reacts. When she is tempted to surrender, she remembers how many times God has already carried her through situations she once thought were impossible. She may become tired, she may cry, she may even question what God is doing, but somewhere beneath all those emotions remains a stubborn faith that refuses to disappear. Her endurance does not mean she never struggles. It means struggle does not permanently separate her from God. She has learned that being chosen does not mean being protected from every painful experience. Sometimes the refining process itself is painful. Gold is purified through intense heat, and in much the same way, character is often revealed under pressure. The difficult seasons expose what is temporary and strengthen what is real. That is why she eventually begins to view her battles differently. She stops asking only, "Why is this happening to me?" and begins asking, "What is God teaching me through this?" That change in perspective becomes powerful. Instead of allowing hardship to convince her that she has been forgotten, she begins to understand that some seasons are preparing her for responsibilities she could not have carried before. Her patience grows, her wisdom becomes deeper, her compassion becomes more genuine, because she knows what suffering feels like, and her faith becomes less dependent on favorable circumstances. The second mark is sacred silence. This woman eventually realizes that she does not have to explain herself to everyone. She does not need to defend every decision, respond to every accusation, or prove her value to people who have already decided to misunderstand her. There was probably a time when she felt compelled to correct every false story and answer every criticism. But maturity teaches her that some battles are won by refusing to enter them. Her silence is not weakness, it is discipline. She understands that there is a difference between having something to say and needing to say it. She knows that reacting emotionally can sometimes give unnecessary power to situations that deserve none of her energy, so she learns to become still. In a culture where everyone is encouraged to speak immediately, respond instantly, and broadcast every thought, she chooses something different. She protects her peace. When others gossip, she refuses to participate. When people provoke her, she pauses. When confusion surrounds her, she seeks God before seeking an audience. This quietness becomes one of her greatest strengths. God often develops people in hidden places. Roots grow beneath the ground long before anyone sees the tree. In the same way, some of the deepest spiritual growth happens away from applause, recognition, and public attention. The chosen woman begins to appreciate those quiet seasons because she realizes that destiny cannot be built on constant noise. She needs moments where she can hear her own thoughts, examine her motives, and listen for God's direction. Her calm may confuse people who expected a reaction. They may wonder why she is not defending herself. They may interpret her peace as weakness or assume she has nothing to say. But what they do not understand is that she has learned something important. She does not have to fight every battle personally. She trusts God with what she cannot control. That does not mean she becomes passive or allows people to mistreat her. Wisdom still requires boundaries. There are times to speak clearly, confront wrongdoing, and walk away from unhealthy situations. But she no longer allows every offense to control her emotions. Her peace becomes too valuable to surrender cheaply. The third mark is divine discernment. Experience has taught her that not everyone who smiles at her has good intentions. Not every opportunity is meant for her. Not every relationship deserves permanent access to her life, and not every attractive door was opened by God. So she learns to look deeper. A chosen woman pays attention to character rather than appearances. She listens not only to what people say, but watches what they consistently do. She becomes less impressed by flattering words because life has taught her that words without integrity mean very little. This discernment does not make her suspicious of everyone, it makes her careful. There is an important difference. Suspicion assumes the worst without evidence. Discernment observes patiently and refuses to ignore patterns. Through prayer, experience, disappointment, and spiritual maturity, she begins recognizing things she once overlooked. She notices when someone's words repeatedly contradict their actions. She recognizes relationships that constantly drain her peace. She becomes aware of situations that look promising but require her to compromise the values God has placed within her. And when she senses that something is wrong, she no longer forces herself to remain simply because leaving feels uncomfortable. She understands that some people are meant to walk beside her for a season, not for a lifetime. This lesson is difficult because chosen women often have compassionate hearts. They want to believe the best about people. They may give second chances, offer forgiveness, and remain loyal long after others would have walked away. But wisdom eventually teaches her that forgiveness does not require unlimited access. She can forgive someone and still create distance. She can love people without allowing them to repeatedly disrupt her peace. She can wish someone well and still understand that their place in her journey has ended. When God removes certain relationships, she stops chasing them. She releases them with grace. That does not mean the separation never hurts. Sometimes it hurts deeply, but she has learned that holding tightly to something God is asking her to release can delay the very future she has been praying for. Her discernment, therefore, becomes protection, not pride. She knows she has an assignment to fulfill, and because of that, she must be careful about who influences her thinking, occupies her time, and gains access to the most vulnerable areas of her life. The fourth mark is resilience through rejection. Almost every woman who develops deep spiritual strength has experienced rejection in some form. Perhaps someone she loved walked away. Maybe she was overlooked for an opportunity she believed was meant for her. Maybe people she trusted misunderstood her intentions. Perhaps she gave her best and still discovered that her best was not appreciated. Rejection hurts because it attacks something deeply human, the desire to belong. But the chosen woman eventually discovers that rejection does not always mean she lacks value. Sometimes rejection is redirection. There are doors she once cried over that she later thanked God for closing. There are relationships she desperately wanted to save that she later realized were preventing her growth. There are opportunities she thought she needed that would have taken her in the wrong direction. She could not understand it while she was hurting, but time revealed what emotion could not. Every no taught her something. Every departure forced her to examine where she was placing her identity. Every heartbreak pushed her toward a deeper relationship with God. Slowly, she stopped measuring her worth by who stayed and who left. She learned that people can reject you without determining your value. That realization changes everything. Now, when someone chooses to leave, she does not immediately chase them. She does not beg people to recognize what they have already decided not to appreciate. She does not destroy herself trying to convince someone that she deserves a place in their life. She blesses them, learns from the experience, and continues forward. Her strength was not developed in comfortable seasons. It was built in moments when she had no choice but to keep moving. Pain became a teacher. Rejection taught her self-respect. Loss taught her gratitude. Betrayal taught her discernment. Loneliness taught her how to stand with God when human companionship disappeared. And disappointment taught her that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually preparation for something she cannot yet see. The fifth mark is spiritual authority. This is where the chosen woman's strength becomes especially visible, though not necessarily in public. She may never stand on a stage. She may never have thousands of followers. She may never hold a religious title or receive recognition for her faith. Yet she understands the power of prayer. She has learned how to fight battles privately. When fear enters her mind, she prays. When her family faces difficulty, she intercedes. When circumstances appear impossible, she does not rely only on what she can physically see. She brings those circumstances before God. There are victories in her life that nobody will ever fully understand because nobody witnessed the prayers that came before them. People may see the result without seeing the nights she spent asking God for strength. They may see her smile without knowing the warfare that took place in her heart. They may admire her peace without realizing how many times she had to choose faith over fear to protect it. Her strength is therefore not rooted in physical power or personality. It is rooted in dependence on God. She has discovered that some battles cannot be won through arguments. Some problems cannot be solved through control. Some situations require surrender, patience, wisdom, and prayer. So she learns to fight differently. Her knees become the place where she finds courage. Her quiet conversations with God become the place where she regains perspective. And because she has remained faithful during seasons when nobody was watching, her confidence becomes increasingly stable. She does not need public recognition to know that her prayers matter. Yet true spiritual authority does not make her arrogant. It makes her humble. She knows the source of her strength. She understands that whatever influence she carries does not come from personal greatness. It comes from the God she trusts. That leads naturally to the sixth mark, humility and victory. When doors finally begin opening for her, she remembers the doors that once closed. When prayers are answered, she remembers the nights when silence was the only answer she seemed to receive. When people finally recognize her value, she remembers what it felt like to be overlooked. Success does not erase her memory. Instead, those memories keep her grounded. She knows how quickly circumstances can change, so she refuses to worship success. She is grateful for opportunities without allowing them to become her identity. She appreciates recognition without becoming dependent on it. When something good happens, her first instinct is gratitude. She remembers that she did not reach this place alone. The struggles taught her that. The nights of uncertainty taught her that. The moments when she had exhausted every human option and could only pray taught her that. So when God begins lifting her into a new season, she does not use her elevation to look down on others. Instead, she becomes more compassionate because she remembers exactly what it felt like to struggle. She remembers the woman she was before the breakthrough. She remembers the tears. She remembers the rejection. She remembers praying for opportunities that she now has, and those memories protect her heart from pride. True power, she realizes, is not found in how many people recognize your name. It is found in remaining faithful when nobody does. And then comes the seventh mark, the one many people describe as divine favor. Divine favor is difficult to measure because it does not always appear in dramatic ways. Sometimes it appears through unexpected opportunities, sometimes through protection from something you never knew was dangerous. Sometimes through the right person entering your life at precisely the right moment. And sometimes favor appears through a closed door that prevents you from walking into something that would have harmed you. The chosen woman eventually stops calling every unexpected blessing luck. She begins recognizing patterns of providence. There are moments when doors open that she could not have opened herself. Help arrives from places she never expected. Opportunities appear when she was not searching for them. People are moved to support her without understanding the full story behind her journey. But she also learns something important. Divine favor does not mean an easy life. A favored life can still contain hardship. Being chosen does not remove opposition. Being faithful does not guarantee that every prayer will be answered according to her preferred timeline. Favor is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of God through difficulty. That distinction changes how she understands her entire journey. She stops believing that every obstacle means God has left her. She stops assuming that every delay means she has failed. She stops comparing her timeline with people whose assignment may be completely different from hers. Instead, she begins trusting the pace of her own journey. A chosen woman does not have to be flawless. She has to remain faithful. She does not need to chase the world because she has discovered that her deepest value cannot be given by the world in the first place. Her past does not have the authority to define her future. Her mistakes are not the complete story of who she is. Purpose speaks louder than history. Every trial she survived has contributed something to the woman she is becoming. She went through fire and learned endurance. She experienced loss and discovered peace. She was broken in places she thought could never heal, yet somehow she continued. Not because she possessed endless strength, but because God continued meeting her in the places where her own strength ended. That is why the world may struggle to understand her. Her story was never designed merely for public approval. She walks differently because she listens differently. When God tells her to move, she moves. When wisdom tells her to wait, she waits. She refuses to allow comparison to pressure her into making decisions before their proper time. She has watched too many people destroy good things by rushing them. So while others hurry, she learns to rest. While others panic, she prays. While others measure progress only by visible results, she understands that some of the most important growth happens where nobody can see it. Waiting is not always wasting. Sometimes waiting is preparation. Sometimes the delay is strengthening the character required to carry the blessing. Sometimes God is developing privately what will eventually become visible publicly. And when her season finally arrives, she will not have to manufacture what God has prepared. She will simply be ready for it. There is a stillness around a woman who has learned this lesson. She no longer needs constant validation to believe she has value. She does not require applause to feel secure. Her confidence comes from something much deeper, the belief that God's hand remains upon her life even when people do not understand her journey. She knows the same God who allowed her to walk through painful seasons can also use those seasons for purpose. The tears were not meaningless. The waiting was not empty. The rejection was not the end. Even her scars begin to tell a different story. They no longer represent only what hurt her. They represent what she survived. Every scar quietly says, "I went through something difficult, and I still believe." She does not need to hide those wounds because she understands that healed wounds often carry wisdom. The experiences she once wished she could erase may eventually become the very experiences that allow her to encourage someone else. God does not have to waste pain. Pain can become compassion. Loss can become wisdom. Rejection can become direction. And suffering can produce a kind of strength that comfort never could. That is why some women seem to carry a light that cannot be explained by appearance alone. It is not simply beauty. It is resilience. It is not charm. It is grace. It is the quiet evidence of someone who has walked through difficult places and discovered that God remained with her. You can sometimes see it in the way she responds to pressure. You hear it in the wisdom of her words. You notice it in the peace she protects. She has walked with God long enough to understand that she does not always have to announce her victories. Sometimes silence itself becomes testimony. And perhaps one of the most powerful truths about the chosen woman is this: God's purpose for her did not begin when people started believing in her. It began long before that, before recognition, before applause, before success, before she even understood what her life could become. There were seasons when nobody saw anything special in her. There may even have been seasons when she saw nothing special in herself. Yet her value was never dependent on human recognition. God saw what others could not see. He knew what could be formed from the pain, what could grow from the waiting, and what kind of woman could emerge from the battles she had not yet faced. That is why disappointment could wound her without permanently defeating her. Her life is sustained by something deeper than human approval. So if you are listening to these words while feeling unseen, misunderstood, delayed, or forgotten, remember this: being hidden does not automatically mean being abandoned. Some seasons are hidden because preparation is happening. Some doors close because protection is happening. Some people leave because redirection is happening. And some delays exist because the person you are becoming needs time to develop before the next chapter begins. You may not understand every part of the process today, but that does not mean the process has no purpose. The pressure may be building endurance. The silence may be teaching discernment. The rejection may be strengthening identity. The waiting may be developing patience. You are not necessarily falling behind. You may be being built. And when the right season arrives, people may finally see what was being developed in private all along. The chosen woman is therefore not defined by what the world can immediately recognize. She is defined by the relationship she develops with God when nobody is watching. She may never wear a crown anyone can see, but she carries grace. People may call her ordinary, yet her calling asks her to live with extraordinary faithfulness. Her steps become more deliberate because she understands that timing matters. Every delay does not mean denial. Sometimes it means preparation. There is a rhythm to her journey that cannot be forced. She begins understanding that what arrives quickly can disappear just as quickly, while what is built patiently often develops roots strong enough to survive storms. And when God chooses a woman for a meaningful purpose, He does not necessarily choose her for comfort. He calls her toward responsibility. He places something within her that will continue drawing her forward, a conviction, a vision, a desire to become more faithful and useful than she was yesterday. That is why she eventually discovers that she cannot live entirely according to the expectations of everyone around her. She cannot lower every standard simply to fit in. She cannot follow every crowd merely because being different feels lonely. Her path requires something deeper, and with that calling comes weight. People may admire what eventually appears as favor, but they rarely see the fire that produced the maturity required to carry it. They see the strength. They do not see the nights she almost gave up. They see the peace. They do not see the battles required to protect it. They see the faith. They do not see the questions she had to walk through before that faith became strong. There are still moments when she becomes exhausted. There are moments when her faith is tested until she wonders how much more she can carry. There are moments when tears come quietly because she does not have the words to explain what she feels. But even then, something within her continues reaching toward God. Even when her hands tremble, she can still lift them in prayer. Even when her voice feels weak, she can still speak words of faith over her circumstances. Because by now she understands something she could not understand at the beginning of her journey. Her strength was never supposed to come entirely from herself. It comes from the God she has learned to trust. And that understanding is only the beginning of what separates a truly chosen woman from the person she used to be.